Welcome to this little series about how to get started with the virtual machines that we provided by the department. So it is structured into several sub-units that you can say as part of this playlist. So let me start with topic 1, which is about virtual machines in general. So what is a virtual machine? We have given you some explanation as part of this little document that we shared with you, but let me read it to you. So in computing, a virtual machine, in short a VM, behaves like an actual computer. So it's basically an emulation of a computer system, which is the hardware and operating system and all the installed software by another program. So we have basically what we call a host system that provides the actual hardware resources like memory, storage, graphics card, and so on to execute this program. But this program then, as I said, simulates to be another computer. So you can think of that there is a computer inside your computer. So the virtual machine is saved, what we call as an image, on this host system and has a configuration like how much memory it may use, where is it stored as a file, and so on. But from the perspective of the operating system, the virtual machine pretty much looks like a normal application. So you can run it as in a window or a full screen application, and it's isolated from any of your operating system. Thus, the changes that you make inside the virtual machine do not influence the host system that you have, which is pretty good because it allows you to play with this virtual computer as much as you like without damaging your computer. To install the virtual machine, you need to install the software, which is called VirtualBox. To do so, follow the link over here, and then you can download VirtualBox for free for your respective operating system, Windows, OS X, Linux, and even Solaris if you want to. That will allow you to run the software that basically emulates these computer systems. And next you have to download the virtual image that we provided from the department. After you've done so, you execute VirtualBox software to get a window that looks a bit like this. On the left hand side I can see the different virtual machines that I have set up, but in your case you won't have any initially. So what you need to do is you need to import a so-called appliance. Therefore, you point it to the respective file. In this case, I import one that I have created a while ago. You click on Next. Here you could change some hardware configurations if you want to, but there will be a separate video about it. And as you can change everything later, it doesn't matter much. Just click on Import, which basically unpacks this compressed appliance and creates the appropriate hardware configuration and an image where all the data will be stored. So it's almost done. Once it's done, you should see here a new machine on the left hand side, which completes pretty much the importing. Alright, so you can see next to a virtual machine, like to a real computer, the status of it. Here we see powered off. So this virtual computer is powered off. We can start it if we like, and then we get the graphical interface of it. In this video, I will briefly document how to use the virtual machine. So if you have downloaded a department virtual machine, you can start this virtual computer by pressing the start button. This will basically show you in this window how the machine boots. So it's really, you can think of it as a real computer that just has been turned on, pushing the start button, and now it has to run all the processes and everything as advised by the operating system. We use actually Ubuntu 20.04, which is a Linux distribution that is freely available. So now the computer should nearly be booted. Now it's booted. Here you can see one little issue. The window is actually very small. To make it bigger, it's often enough to minimize it and maximize it again. Now the operating system here fills the full screen. So everything that is now underneath this little menu, up to this gray area here, belongs to our virtual computer. The rest here belongs to this application, the VirtualBox application, okay? So if I click here, that's the menu of this application VirtualBox that allows me to control my virtual computer. While if I click inside here, I will click into this virtual computer, which is really like another computer. Okay, so like a real computer, you may want to power it off after you've done with your work. So click on the top right, power off, and then power off, and now it basically will be turned off and you are again in the powered off state, which completes this little tutorial. In this little video I will talk a bit about graphics of the virtual machine. So after it's booted, you might sometimes see that the window is smaller than it should be. It is possible to run VirtualBox in two modes. One mode is the window mode. So I have now a window that I can resize, and the operating system inside the virtual machine basically will see that the window has been resized, and so it will resize this desktop, which belongs to this virtual computer, accordingly. Sometimes what you want to, when you really work for longer time, you want to maximize it and will be, as full as possible. You have also the opportunity to click here on full screen mode, which basically says the virtual machine, like if you play a game for instance, will be run not in a window mode but really occupy the full screen. If you click this, it will inform you that in this mode you can return by pressing the host key plus F. So the host key is always a special key on your keyboard that basically is communicating with this VirtualBox application and therewith allows you to control this virtual computer. It is difficult as you have one keyboard to control your host system and the virtual machine at the same time. So they have come up with this idea that a special key, in this case is my right control key, is used to communicate with this application. So let me click here now on switch to get a full screen experience. So now that looks pretty much like a regular desktop system, right? And I can work with it like a real computer system. There is on the bottom though still this control menu that gives me the opportunity to manipulate my virtual machine. Okay, so I recommend you to use full screen if you work for a longer time with the VM, to do some coursework or what have you. But don't get confused. Always try to remember what is the host system and what is the virtual machine. So let me now power it off again. Okay, one very important aspect for you might be the keyboard and language setting. So by default, a couple of languages has been installed. You can switch the keyboard layout on the top right. For example, here English UK should be the default, but you may have a different keyboard. Here you find that Chinese and German has been set up, but what happens if you need your own setup? Well, you click here on settings, and then you scroll down to language and region, and there, after you selected this, you can go here to clicking on the plus to add further keyboard input sources. Unfortunately, you have to click here the ... again, scroll down and click other, and finally, well, it will take a couple of seconds to load. You can select any language that you like and any keyboard layout, so a typical keyboard layout like QWERTZ or what have you. Once you've installed it, let me install, oh well, I found it, Serbian Russia layout. It's now here, and if I click here, I can again select it. So this gives you the opportunity to basically adjust to your local keyboard setup very easily. So this session is about communication. So how can you communicate if you have two computer systems? In this case, you have the host system and you have your virtual computer inside your host system. How can you make so to exchange data and information? There are two ways that I want to talk about. One way is how do you exchange data like files? Basically, if you are inside your computer system, this virtual computer system, and if I click on the file navigation, like the navigation system of your operating system, the Explorer or what have you, you will have basically a file system that is totally different from the one that you may have on your computer. So if you are under Windows, you wouldn't see any of those files. So what you may want to do still is that you want to copy files from inside the virtual machine to your Windows host computer, or like tasks from your Windows host computer to this virtual machine. There is luckily a very good way of doing this, which is called shared folders. To get started, you go here to the navigation menu on the bottom, click on shared folder settings, and here you can set up a shared folder. What you need to do is you select a folder in your host computer. Let me take, for example, my temp directory. This is now in my host computer, okay? This directory I want to now make available inside my virtual machine. To do so, I click here Auto Mount and make permanent. I have to define a mount point, and I recommend you to use something like /mnt, which exists inside the virtual machine. You click OK, you click OK again in the shared folder. Now if I click on the mnt directory, voila, what you will see is the files from outside the virtual machine. So I can really now create here files, and these files become available in your Windows, OS X or Linux machine that you have, which gives you this really convenient way of working. I recommend you to store basically all the files that you want to manipulate in such a directory and not inside the virtual machine image itself, okay? Because the virtual machine has a certain size, a couple of gigabytes, while your files are typically very small, and you may want to, exchange them with colleagues or with the department. Okay, that concludes shared directories, really quick. I can also remove them again, by the way. Let me do that. I remove this directory. Now, if I click on MNT again, it's empty. Okay, you can only do this with empty directories. Okay, a second way of information exchange is the clipboard. So your computer system has a clipboard, Control C, Control V typically in Windows. What you can do is we can configure the virtual machine, and by default it is configured that way that it uses the same clipboard, which is convenient to exchange links or whatever information. So I can copy here, then I can go to my host system, and let me go here to this little Google Doc, which is and paste it here. Okay, let me copy from here. So this is now outside, right, of this virtual computer. It is my host system that runs the virtual computer. I copy from here and I paste here, and you can see the text is pasted. Okay, so you can really use this for information exchange. It's very convenient. So this last video here will show you real quick how you can change the settings of the virtual machine. You can do this only if the machine is powered off. You can think of it like this real computer is powered off and you change the hardware, for example, right? You remove some, or you add some main memory, you add a CD drive, whatever, right? You can only do this when it's turned off. You click on settings, and there you will find the different settings that you can manipulate. Importantly is typically how much main memory you have available. And in my machine I have 16 gigabyte. I can, decide how much memory I want to give to this virtual computer. 4 gigabyte is typically quite good for this Linux machine, but you can also go down to 2 gigabytes depending on what you have. Some of you, depending on your real existing hardware, may have to change this processor setting over here in system and may remove this little tick here to enable physical address extensions, which is something that processor provides. It may not in your case, so you have to remove it. You can also change how many processors the system will have available. 2 is a good number, and there are many more options, how much video memory, what graphics hardware is available. All of these have basically same defaults, but you may have to change them or may want to change them to give the machine more or less resources, right? It comes also with a virtual USB controller to give you the opportunity to really connect USB devices. And again, you can choose, what kind of USB controller you like. With that, just let me conclude. Virtual machines are really flexible and they behave a little bit like real computers. It will be not easy for you to initially understand and distinguish between this host system and this virtual machine. But as long as you think of it as a real computer, I believe you will succeed. And if you have further questions, please talk to us or add some annotations to our shared Google Doc. Thank you, and I wish you success. Hello, my name is Julian Kunkel, and I am happy to give you a little bit of introduction to how to use in the virtual machine Apache web server to deploy your own web pages, and a little bit of PHP intro, but that will be a second video. Alright, so let's get started. Well, first of all, after we've booted your VM, I just done that here, we open a little terminal here on the left. Let me just do it again. Here we go. We have a little terminal. I will increase the font size, pressing Ctrl+ for you. Now I can type in this Linux environment all the commands interacting with my operating system. On the system that you have here, there's the Firefox web browser installed, and there's also Apache and all the needed software that you may need for your final year project, but also for your HCI if you want to do web page development very conveniently. So first of all, let's input localhost and press enter. What you find here is this error message forbidden because we don't have yet access to the resource. And I will explain you what exactly is going on and how to get started in the VM with it. So the Apache web server here runs as root, which is started by the root user, but it runs with the user permissions of www data. So which is a user. So there is some kind of isolation. But this is a different user than the Ubuntu user. So if you want to make changes, what you need to do is you become root, which I do by inputting sudo su. And what I wanted to show you first of all is there exists two log files, and log files in Linux you find traditionally, in var log. So if I have a look at var log, you find all the log files that is relevant, and we are interested in Apache 2. Apache is a web server, a standard, typical one, highly used in industry. So here you find the log files, and what is interesting for you is access log and error log. Access log will show any kind of accesses. So we see an HTTP GET request here to this resource, to the root resource, and we see the browser information and such. But if during your development, what you find very important is to have a look at the error log, right? So what I typically do is I use the command tail, and I use -f, which says to follow up. So it will constantly give me any new line and print it to the output. And then I put it in the background using the ampersand over here. Now I will see the error messages, and what we find immediately is that it says here, client denied by server configuration home Ubuntu examples. Yeah. So the reason is that this initial default directory, I've moved it when just before I prepared and finalized the VM. That's why this error occurs, but we will fix it, and we use this opportunity to understand a little bit how this works. So first of all, under the directory etc Apache2 sites enabled, there is this configuration csconfig, which contains the web page configuration basically. And I use the nano editor now to show it to you. What we find here is that the web server listens to port 80, which is the HTTP port, and then it has a certain email address here, and it has a document root. The document root is what is shown here if I type in localhost / it's basically the main directory accessed here. So let me just go up and down. So it expects it to be examples HTML, but it's not there. Maybe if you do your own project, let's do something like cool project here and change it to it. Okay? Or, let's call it just project. Web project, okay? Then I have to change the root directory from here as well, so saying it web project. Here you find certain options that you could set. There's more information in the web about it. The defaults are typically rather suitable for you, okay? And that's pretty much this configuration. There is not too much here, but at the end, what you'll find is we see the information about the error log and where the access log is stored, and we have them stored on this Apache log dir, which was in var log Apache2, right? So no change here. Once I'm done, I save it, and then I say init Apache2 restart or reload, but I want to really restart the server. And now we get our message, okay, done. And what we need to do in the my home directory, I need to create this what I called www project, because that's what the server tries to deliver. Now let me reload the page, and it says again, I cannot access web project. Oh, so it's a typo, right? So we see the error message here, and instead we call it www project, but it was called web project. Okay, so let me remove it, move it to web project, done. Here we go. Now the web server actually for the first time delivered something useful, which is the index of this directory. And if I create here a file and reload the web browser, you see it's there now. So a strength of the Apache web server, in my, as I can say from my experience, I used this kind of web development for maybe 20 years, is that you can implement server-sided stuff using a programming language such as PHP, right? It means it allows you from the client, which is a web browser, to use HTML and JavaScript, and from the JavaScript you can call on your web server certain activities, right? So I can come back to my VM, and in my web, here is my browser, right, which is the client. But here in my Linux machine, which is my virtual machine, I can trigger certain events, which is quite useful using this kind of programming language. And I will show you that in another video. This video was really about Apache 2. Let's do now a little bit of web development. So I first create a file like index.html here, and we do a very standard, very simple web page to get started. And we want to see what happens if I open it over here. Right, and by the way, I strongly recommend you to use Git. So let me just do it. So I create with Git init my new repository and do git add index.html so that I have a version controlled environment. However, when you deploy something like this, you must always be sure that the .git directory is not exposed, okay, to the World Wide Web. Good, let's see what happens. If I reload now, it's empty. Why is it empty? Let me inspect, the page. And the page is pretty much empty. Why is that? Well, we haven't saved anything in Atom yet. So let me do that. HTML language equals English, right? And HTML, let me create a very dummy one. Body. Let me increase the font size again, by the way. Body, right? All right. And here we say something like, H1, this is a test. H1. Okay. So this is a valid HTML page, right? So I can immediately reload the page, and here we go. This is a test with my body over here, right? So far no magic, and you know how to do this. And you can of course include here CSS and putting it just in this directory if you like, and it will work pretty seamlessly as you've learned from your HCI module. What I wanted to show you instead is I want to give you a short introduction to PHP. So what is PHP? Well, it is a general purpose scripting language, and it's dynamic. It's the hypertext preprocessor. And it's used for pretty much in 1994, and it's now also advanced. It has a couple of features. It's very lightweight for certain activities and easy to learn. So you can do a lot of tasks that you would need by just Googling them. And that's, I find, so very much appealing. So let me show you, by the way, PHP, help, right? There is a very great page. All right, yeah, I agree. There is a couple of great pages. And the best one I like is php.net. Yeah, this one has an awesome manual where you can find anything that you want about PHP. Okay, and here you see, basic language reference, security, features, all the functions. It's all there. And this should be really a short video. That's why I don't go into too much detail. But what I want to do now with you is I wanted to create a little web app that does something on the server, right? And why not do an input by a user and then save the input given by a user into the file, right? And so again, you can wonder, how do you do web forms? And I suppose you know it, but let me, do it. HTML5, web form, and we want to use the get. All right. So your first web form, right? So here's an example. I like that one. Yeah, sure. Very much. And we just take it and paste it. Form first name. Yeah. That's last name. I think that is pretty much, what we had here. So let's just take it, put it here, right, in my HTML. So that pretty much works. It will not do something yet useful, but we get there. So here we have those two input form elements. Oh, by the way, I made here a typo. So I have to enter tag h1. So now what I want, I need to submit it. And so we need the input, which is a button, right? So there is, of course, a help how to do a button, right? And a clickable button, right? We need the submit button, right? So let me find it, the submit button, right? Input type submit, that's exactly what we need. So let me put this button now here. Here we go. So now let's go back. Now we have, well, a submit query. That is a bit awkward, I'd say. So input type submit. No. So we give this maybe another name. And let me just run it, submit query. That is a little bit better. But there is a way to exactly its value. Here we go. You can say, you can use the value here, and then you say submit, and that's the title that we give it, right? So it's a submit button. Hop, here we go, submit, right? So now when I push this button, you see that this page actually reloads, yeah? Why is that so? Well, because we did do a get HTTP GET request, where here we see the arguments, right? So the first name, if I put here test, last name is last, and I put submit, you find here the arguments. But our web page has now sent this information to the server. So if I would look at the access log, I would see that this is the URL, but I have not yet any method to take on the server this information and do something useful. And that's now where we can start it with PHP. Before we start with PHP, we need to install it. Of course, I wasn't sure if you might find it useful in the virtual machine. Therefore, we go back to our terminal, and here what you can do is you type in sudo apt install, and then we need to find, of course, the name of the package that we need to install. Luckily, it's very easy in Linux to find out those things. You just Google for it, or if you want to use a tool, there's apt cache. You can type a search query like PHP, and let's grab for APACHE2. Here I find lib apache mod PHP. I just use the middle mouse pointer to copy and paste it, and I do apt install this package. I have now already installed it. For you, you have to put yes, and then it will install this package. It will automatically reload the server. What we also need to install is SQLite for the database access that I want to show you. So let's search for PHP and grab SQLite. Right, with 2 L's, no, we don't find it. So I made a mistake. Let's do with 1. Here we go. Here's SQLite. And again, I can say apt install the name like SQLite 3, and it should work. Right? Particularly when you use sudo. Remember, with sudo you get root access. That gives you all the might to change anything you like. Okay, so now that I've done it, let's go back to our page here. Right? We recall that's our standard page. Let's get our first PHP server-sided stuff going. And it's as simple as that, as saving our index.html file as index.php. Now that is already a PHP script, because PHP was basically one of the first languages that used this augmentation of another language. Here we have HTML text code markup, and we just can put in the commands. To put in a command, you do basically those 2 characters, and you end it so, and now I can put any PHP code here, which is executed on the server. All right. So what I can do, I can say something like print h1, this is a test, and that should add another kind of HTML content. So in PHP, it's very close to C. It has a couple of object-oriented stuff. You just use semicolon to terminate a command. So let's run our example again, and we get this is a test. So I should probably have put here PHP. The typical mistake, not to put those 5 tokens, depending on how it's configured. Now we go. This is a test. This is a test. That I can absolutely recommend to you is the command var dump. What it does, well, it takes a variable and dumps it readably out. So what we want to do is we want to dump our get variable. So everything that is submitted here on the top, we want to dump it out and see what it is. Okay, so I just say var dump dollar underscore get, and in this variable underscore get is all the get variables. So if I run it, you see we get an array which has f name, which is a string to test, and ln name, a string to last. Now, wasn't that easy? I'd say. Right. So what we want to do is, of course, we want to check if there is one of these data present. So PHP has associative arrays and normal arrays. So let me search here. What we want is PHP associative array check in if key exists. Exactly. Right, there exists a very good function and it's called array key exists. Now that's pretty good. So what we want to do is we say if, of course, like I said, it's C, very similar to C, if key exists in get, let me see the syntax, did I make no mistake, right? Okay, so it takes the search key basically and then the array. Okay, so we have to swap it. So if the key exists, you know, the user has given us fname, which is the field that we have specified here. Then we want to go to a different page, right? So what we want to say is print hello, and now we can use the dot instead of plus to concatenate strings, get fname, okay? That sounds like something we want to actually print. Hey, h1. All right. So that looks good. By the way, if you forget semicolon or anything, you will get an error because your code doesn't work. Let me do it, show you. Nothing appears here, and you will see on the error message, you know, syntax error, on line 8. So that's why I really enjoy, you know, to print out and debug our error log in Apache, right? Like I shown you in the initial video. Okay, anyway, going back, let's fix this error that I did. Here we go, hello test, right? And if I'm Julian and I put it in, hello Julian. Great. So now you may say, yeah, this is doable with JavaScript. Absolutely true, yeah? That's not what I not want to use it for. What I want to use it for is that I want to create a file now and store the data given by this user. Okay, something that you couldn't do otherwise. So let me find out how this works, right? So I can just, you know, again, go Google PHP, you know, write file. I don't know actually how it's called, but I do search for it. So this is a great function. File put contents. So you see W3 schools, they have great, actually really great tutorials as well, but I really prefer the one on PHP manual because that's typically where I go. Okay, so it works. And typically the great thing about it is you get examples here. Okay, and so it's easy. We say file put contents, the file name, and then current. By the way, all variables in PHP, they start with $. Okay, always $, means there is a variable. Okay, so let me do now file put contents. And why not save it in a file called username.txt? Actually, that's dangerous, by the way. Yeah, to do it. But we'll do it. Okay, for the purpose of showing you. Right? Remember, this happens on the server with the user www data. By the way, how about I make it a bit safer? I say users. Right? And then I put in, you know, the username text. And I want to, what do you want to put? Well, we want to put the last name, okay? So we put the username lname as part of the contents, and I can put any string that I like, you know, like hello, and then the last name. Okay, let's see. So what I need to do here, I need to, it will always work relatively to the position of my script. So users will be in the directory of web root. So I create this directory, users, and I have to give it the permissions that the www user can basically write into it. So I do change mode 777. Now everyone can write to it, and you see it's empty. Now I go here, I say, you know, Julian, and my last name is Kunkel, and I say submit. Here we go. So let's have a look, and here you find the file Julian text, right? Now hello Kunkel, it's sent exactly as we programmed it. So as you see, that's really easy to enact certain activities on the service, and you can use PHP to actually run more complicated applications, maybe C, Java, or what have you, and then input something given by the user. So you can use it as glue between your whatever backend software you have and connect it to the World Wide Web, basically. That's why I find it really convenient. Good, so that was really a very quick introduction to it. I will have one more video in which I show how to build a basic RESTful API with it from JavaScript. The goal of this video is to show you real quick how to build a RESTful API with PHP, but this is really just the beginning, and I wanted to make it as simple as possible for you. So what we first need to do, we create a new file api.php, and then we start with the PHP tags. And what you can do with in part of the web server is that you have to change the return type that it gives. Normally it delivers HTML pages, but what we want to deliver is a JSON document in UTF-8. We also have to put in something like this information here, because that's security in JavaScript later. So how to use this information? Well, we can use it in JavaScript to request a JSON document. What is a JSON document? Let me give you an example. Something like as simple as this is an array. In this array I have an array of people. What I want to put is something like Julian, and what is so the name is Julian of the first person. So I do it so, and then what else to say? Student ID is 4711. Okay, so this here is now outside of the PHP code. That means this is returned, and it's returned as a JSON, not as an HTML. Let me go to our browser, type in api.php. Here we go. So we can have first a look at the raw data. The raw data is our JSON. Firefox has detected that this is a JSON document, and it kind of nicely renders this data for us. Okay, so that's it. That's really basic, but of course we want to do something more useful. So what we want to do is we want to connect a database. And a very simple database that you can always use is SQLite. And how to use it? Well, you can just use the SQLite 3 command to basically create a database, and it's really simple. So I can do something like data.db here, and then you can use the .help command to get a little bit more information. All those helper functions typically start with dot. I want to create a table, so I can use SQL, right? So I do something like create table student, and students, I have name is text, and I have student ID, which is integer. Done. Now I have my little database. I can run .schema. I have a table student. So let me insert something. Insert into student name and student ID. Values Julian and 4711. Done. Now I can run select star from student, and I get basically the data. So if that's not simple, I don't know. So now I have my database, data.db. If you look at it, you will find that the permissions are wrong. So we need to make it writable by the database. I need to set it with the permission 777 again, and that would give anyone write access, including our web server. Right, and remember, there's not a security problem because this is my development machine, not a problem. Okay, now I have my database, and I of course want to use it. So first I need to connect. I created the code before, so I use SQLite 3 on my database file, and now I get an object because new tells PHP that this is an object in my handle. Now I can do something with the database. What do you want to do? Well, for example, what we want to do is we want to run a query, select star from people. Now this gets saved as res, the variable res. We remember variables always start with $. And the next thing I want to do, I want to basically do something with this data. And what I want to do, I want to fetch an array. So I take it res, which is this object that is returned by the database, and I have to fetch the first row as an array. So every time you call fetch array, basically you get an array, and I want to get an associate array in this case, which means I get something like name, student ID with the appropriate values, which is similar to what I had in JSON. So this is, I save it as row, and as long as something comes back, I can move my cursor in my database further, getting the next row and so on. Okay, now then I here created an empty array. What I do here, I push into this array this result of the row, and at the end what I want to do, I want to call JSON encode. So I want to store this variable data and return it as JSON. Now let's have a look what happens if I do this. So there's no further input here anymore. Let me delete all this. Right, I could delete it, but I keep it because it documents things. So let me run it. So there is nothing returned. This is awkward. Probably I have an error. That's an indication. So I have to check my error log. And as we printed it, we find, oh, no such table people. And that's right, because we called it student, I think. So let's call this here student. And there we go. Now we have here our data. Yeah, we get an array with our single student. And let me insert some more students using our command line interface. And by the way, it is as simple as this query here. You know, you say insert into people and so on, the new values. Yeah, to add something new into the database. By the way, there is a way to protect the data that you would use in a query, because user may try to use something called an SQL injection, which is an attack to get data on your database. So what you do, use special functions, use SQL prepare functions to make sure that the user has not tried to give you to make some weird things, right? Let me show you an example. So I could say, for example, database is student here, and then I could have done here select star from $db. The problem is if this variable would stem now from the user, like we remember, here we submitted the username and first name and last name. If I want to insert them into the database, what will happen is that the user could put in a weird name like, you know, select star from update table something and so on, or give me the usernames, then it would be a problem. That's why there exists this prepare method. I'm not showing it now, but just mention Google for prepare with PHP and SQLite and you find it. It's very easy. Okay, but anyway, coming back to this task, what I wanted to show you is I want to say here insert into student values, something like Karen is, you know, 12, right? And now I use Control D or .exit to end SQLite to persist my query. And I go back here into my web browser, I run it, and now I have two inputs, right? So that happens on the server. And now you can, of course, use JavaScript to connect it to get this data and do something useful. And likewise, I hope you can see that it's rather simple to use change this code here to actually inject the data given by the user into our database. And I really recommend you to use very simple PHP. There's a lot of very complicated frameworks, but what you probably need for your final year projects and as part of, you know, this little exercise in HCI, you don't need so complicated code. You may want to use very simple stuff as this one. Good luck.